Hey everyone, I'm Andrea Ferretti and this is Yogaland. Welcome back, Jason.
Hello, Andrea.
This is our second pranayama episode.
It is.
We did a first episode last week, which was basically why pranayama matters.
Yeah.
And we're excited to have the second one. This one, we're going to focus on really common mistakes that yoga teachers make when teaching pranayama.
Yeah. And of course, why those mistakes matter and how simple it is to fix them.
Yeah.
And I also, just for the viewers out there, those of you that are watching us on YouTube, we have Ginger Rose Crandall live and direct in my lap.
Yes.
And I feel very good about it.
Special guest.
Special guest.
Special guest. She had to, she was feeling a little cramped by the microphone situation, but she's feeling better now. So we're all settled.
Yeah, she's a good problem solver.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We also have your courses on sale.
It is on sale. We have a ton of participants already. I am so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really, like I said to you in the last conversation, this program was really big for me to create. And I feel really satisfied with having created it. And I feel really satisfied that it's going over so well.
Yeah. So if you want to go check it out, learn all about it, or sign up and join us, it's jasonyoga.com/breathwork.
Yeah.
And there's two program options. You can choose the self-paced option, where you obviously move through all of the material on your own at your own pace, or you can sign up for group calls. So you could still move through the recorded content at your own pace, but then you would join a once monthly group call where you're going to practice together and have some Q&A, right?
That's right.
So once a month for 12 months?
Once a month for 12 months.
Yeah.
And the schedule and times for all that is on the website.
On the page. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just, they're both really great options.
They're both great options. I think the group call option is a bargain.
It is an insane bargain if it works for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to, if you have time to join the group calls and all that stuff. Yeah. Okay. So let's jump into our podcast.
Yeah.
And we'll start with the first common mistake, which is not teaching pranayama at all.
Yeah. Let's just start with mistakes in general as a yoga teacher. We all make them. We will all continue to make them. They're normal. They're healthy. When I teach trainings, one of the things that I try to remind people of is not only is practicing yoga a practice, and it should be perceived as such, but teaching yoga is a practice. And in addition to that, teaching yoga is live. Like even when I film courses and they're not live, I still don't do a ton of editing. And so as a yoga teacher, we should continue to grow and change and evolve and iterate and not be stuck in the past or stuck in our old patterns. And the nature of that means that we're going to continue to change and evolve. So if anyone has made these mistakes or is making these mistakes that we're going to talk about it, join the club. Mm-hmm. You have good company. I've made all of these and then some. Now.
Yeah, it's not like a big criticism.
Not a criticism.
It's just self-reflection.
Not a criticism, but let's get it right. No. Okay, so the first mistake when it comes to teaching pranayama is to not teach it at all. Mm-hmm. And every yoga teacher is going to fairly regularly say, breathe, right? Breathe. We might even say breathe slowly, breathe deeply. We might give some breath-based cues, or we might, especially if we're a vinyasa yoga teacher, we might coordinate breath with movement. But what I'm talking about here is not having a distinct section of practice that is for pranayama. Mm-hmm. And I want to say I have made this mistake for probably 25 years. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I think that we make this mistake as teachers is we don't know how to teach it, or we don't feel comfortable teaching it. Another reason is we've been told by others that we shouldn't or we can't teach pranayama. Another reason, this is so common, is we don't trust that our students are interested or that our students value it, mm-hmm. right? And I've said this in so many podcasts. I said this in our last podcast. As a yoga teacher, you're in a very vulnerable position. You're in front of people, and you're talking
And they're staring at you.
and they're staring at you, right? And you don't want to be boring. And so in that situation, it can be very difficult to trust things that are quiet and subtle, right? And we know that, I mean, it depends on style of practice and it depends on cohort and demographic, but more or less in a modern era, we know one of the main things people want to do in class is to stretch and move, right? But I think that we don't fully appreciate that students also, whether they know it or not, want to regulate their nervous system. And so we don't fully trust that that teaching pranayama is going to be well received, that it's like worth it and a value for the time. Right. And I completely understand all of those concerns.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that even though we don't teach yoga to, to be performing, there is still an element of like, you're not getting as much auditory or visual feedback when you're teaching a really subtle practice. So as a teacher, it's probably harder to suss out, like, is this landing? How are people receiving it? Whereas when you're teaching physical movement, you're seeing them move at least. So
to be honest with you, I haven't really thought about it the way that you're stating it, but that is absolutely correct. Right?
There's not as much to feed off of as the teacher.
Yeah. So when you're teaching, one of the strange things is teaching in a way is conversational. It's conversational with someone's body and it's conversational with someone's inner dimensions and depth. But when you're talking to them, giving cues, they aren't returning words to you.
Right.
They're returning movements, right?
Energy.
Right. And so maybe teachers that are used to teaching restorative, maybe some forms of prenatal, some forms of yin, might be more experienced with having less movement, like less being more being more comfortable with a teaching conversation that's less a dynamic feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
But for many people, it's exactly as you're saying, it's hard to trust that when you're communicating and you're not seeing
anything.
Yes.
You're not seeing anything. It's like that with meditation. So someone asked me once, it seems like you teach at a really natural pace. Like, how do you know how quickly to instruct? And they were commenting on a meditation that was very much like a free form meditation where I would just say something every once in a while. And I said, well, for that meditation, I actually dropped in myself. So it was like very, very natural to just instruct every once in a while. It's much easier to instruct for me with subtle things when I'm able to do the practice with them. But when I'm sitting on the outside teaching a very specific meditation technique and I'm just watching or I'm just delivering instruction, it is so hard to know what's landing or not.
Absolutely.
So I would imagine it'd be similar.
So then the question comes, how do we start to fix it? Right? Like, how do we fix this issue of not teaching pranayama at all? And the first thing that I want to say is you have to value it. And I want to be very respectful, right? Which is some of our listeners are not going to be interested in teaching pranayama. And if you're a yoga teacher and you're not interested in teaching pranayama, that's okay. Then you don't have to teach it, right? There's bandhas, there's mudras, there's asanas, there's pranayamas, there's kriyas, there's all sorts of different meditation techniques. No one ever teaches the full totality of techniques that exist, right? So this is one of those things is like, I always want to reach and help the teachers teach something that they are interested in and that they want to share, but they don't quite know how or feel comfortable with, right? And so that's who I'm going to speak to in a moment. If you're a listener and you're like, not my thing, don't really care, totally fine. Then it's totally okay not to, right? But I think the first thing people can do other than, of course, take this course, is find one time in class and one pranayama technique and just do it for 3 to 5 minutes. The thing is, the greatest amount of increase or change or improvement anyone's going to make is when they go from zero to something, right? So we don't have to think to ourselves as teachers like, oh, I'm not teaching pranayama, and in order to start teaching pranayama, I need to know 40 different techniques and I need to start teaching it yesterday. No. Choose the beginning of class or choose the end of class. Start with 3 minutes and pick one technique, whether that's simple ujjayi breathing, whether that's Viloma, whether that's box breathing, right? And again, I teach all sorts of different options for this in the training. But the point is, just like as a teacher, you don't want to overwhelm your students with too much information and too much incoherence or randomness, although I do all of those things from some time to time as a teacher, you don't overwhelm yourself. Like literally just say, I'm going to pick 3 to 4 minutes. It's going to be at the beginning of class or it's going to be at the end of this class, and it's going to be one simple technique. And most importantly, I'm going to trust it.
Right. So this is sort of mistake number 2 we're getting into, which is overcomplicating things.
Yes.
Yeah, trying to teach too many techniques at once.
Yeah, okay, so each one of these mistakes, of course, is going to blend into each other, right? And so when we're dealing with not teaching pranayama at all, the first thing we have to do is just feel comfortable teaching one thing. And then mistake number 2, would you say it again, please?
Teaching too many techniques at once, not trusting simplicity.
Yeah, so that's a little bit different. Okay.
Okay.
So teaching too many techniques is feeling like it's kind of like intense, complicated yoga sequencing meets pranayama. So here's what I mean by this. Sometimes as yoga teachers, we feel like we got to get it all in. There are yoga teachers out there that literally in 30 minutes try to do 75 things that the body does 10 times over. And there are plenty of people that when they teach pranayama in a short increment of time, they will teach many different techniques. Because again, this goes back to the feeling of not wanting to bore our students. So we start to cram things in. And the best thing to do is to actually trust that if you have limited time, doing fewer things for longer and going deeper is going to have a larger net effect on somebody than doing more things for a short period of time and not going as deeply, right? It's kind of like, I'm going to kind of go out there, but I'm going to say, if you were to try to do a 3 to 5 minute pranayama practice, and you did Nadi Shodhana and Kapalabhati and Bhastrika and a couple of ujjayi breaths, that's way too much.
Yeah.
No one can land, because one of the things, and we'll talk about this in a moment, is all breathing techniques, for them to be impactful, have to establish a rhythm, right? And so that rhythm is going to take a couple minutes to drop in. So if you do one pranayama technique for 3 minutes, people are going to be able to drop into that rhythm. But if you do 3 pranayama techniques in 3 minutes, it's way too much. And I think this comes down, I've said in so many of my trainings, I've just felt like this for so long. As instructors, we actually have to trust that simple things done well are repeatable and effective. Like literally in every phase of life, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a musician, whether you're a cook, whether you're a partner, whether you're a friend, whether you're a manager, whatever you are, if you can do fundamental things really well and consistently, you're really good at your job. And instead of overcomplicating techniques or teaching them not at all or teaching too many of them, we actually just have to trust the impact of simple techniques done well and done consistently.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
so key.
So should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is relying too heavily on more complicated techniques like Nadi Shodhana, Bhastrika, and Kapalabhati.
Yeah. So we might dwell on this one a little bit. Okay. Not dwell on it. That sounds negative. We might linger on it. I am not throwing Nadi Shodhana, alternate nostril breathing, Bhastrika, and Kapalabhati under the bus. They're in the course. They're really powerful techniques. They're really useful techniques. I think that they can be taught in mixed level settings. I think that they're good to teach, but I think that they're pretty complicated.
Mm-hmm.
They are not foundational breathing techniques. I almost think a little bit, I don't know why I'm even going here, but I almost kind of feel like Nadi Shodhana, Kapalabhati, and Bhastrika are almost like the deep back bends, arm balances, and inversions of the pranayama world.
Mm-hmm.
They're not fundamental. To do those techniques well, you have to have really good understanding and control of your diaphragm. You have to have really good understanding and control of your abdominals. You have to have like a good ability for your mind and your nervous system to absorb demand. And especially Nadi Shodhana, because you're doing the alternate nostril stuff, you're involving a hand, you're involving like occluding a nostril.
Yep.
For a lot of people that are new to those techniques, they feel like they're drowning.
Yeah. Can I say something about Nadi Shodhana?
Yeah. So in a second. So they're very, like I said, I am all for them. I teach them. They're in the course, but I'm not going to have someone do a drop back before they can do locust pose.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more thing, and then I would love to hear your story, which is, I don't know. Okay. For Kapalabhati and Bhastrika, we're bypassing the central mechanism of breathing, which is skillful usage of the diaphragm. In Kapalabhati and Bhastrika, you're not doing a functional breathing technique.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? You're not. Like you're doing something that is useful.
Right.
But you aren't helping yourself breathe better. You're doing a hyperventilation interventionist technique that can really bring your mind into the present moment. There's reasons to do it. But Kapalabhati and Bhastrika are not helping you they're not helping you breathe better.
Mm-hmm.
And then also when it comes to alternate nostril breathing, you should be able to breathe pretty well and consistently between two nostrils.
Yeah.
Before you start to deal with one nostril,
mm-hmm.
right? And so these are good techniques, but they're things that I think are really overly relied on. And they're things that ideally are built up to.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear it.
That was yeah.
Let's hear it.
All right. So I will say that Nadi Shodhana is one of my all-time favorite yoga breathing techniques in terms of what I learned. I've never learned it anywhere else, only in yoga. And I learned it in teacher training, and we got to do it slowly. We got to play around with different retentions or not retentions. We had lots of time to explore it. And I love doing it on my own. I have relied on it many times when I've been in situations where I'm really stressed out and I need to calm down. However, I had a teacher who would teach it weekly in like a regular hour-long yoga class. And it used to stress me out so much because, like you said, it was like jumping into the deep end in the first 5 minutes of class. I just my body wasn't ready for it. I could never do the inhalations or the retentions long enough. So I was always like, and then I felt kind of bad about myself because I couldn't keep up. And it was just so funny to me because it's a technique that I love when I can control it and do it on my own. But in a classroom setting, for me, I always felt like I needed to warm up to it more. So I am very much, I have some confirmation bias with what you're saying for sure.
These techniques, they're like I said, they're common, but they're not foundational,
Hmm.
right? And I think that kind of going along with what you're saying is, look, as yoga teachers, like I've said a dozen times already in this episode, we sometimes we overcompensate because we don't want to bore people and because we value people's time and we want, I'll just say it, we want people to like us and we want people to like yoga. And so
Hmm.
sometimes in life that leads to overcompensation. But what gets left out of that thought process is that when we overcomplicate something and overcompensate for something, and it's a little bit beyond someone's current ability, it's awkward and it's a turnoff.
Hmm.
And people don't want to do it. The other thing about those techniques is I think you have to have a more consistent breathing practice to start to incorporate those consistently at home.
Hmm.
I think one of the things I always think about as a yoga teacher are some of the things I'm teaching now, can they break through? And when that person is stressed or when that person has tight hips, can they go do those for a couple of minutes at home? Right. And one of the things I talk a lot about in the training is and actually in all my settings is, I want a certain fundamental functionality to what I teach so that what I teach is applicable to us in the yoga room, but also an applicable skill that's immediately transferable outside of the yoga room.
Hmm.
And for many people, doing Kapalabhati or Bhastrika, in their office before a meeting is not going to happen.
Right.
Right? It's not going to happen.
Unless they're about to go into a meeting and like, ready for this presentation.
Yeah, exactly. Which is all good, right? And if you do that, that's fine. You're totally a seasoned breather.
Yeah.
But being able to learn some foundational techniques that underpin those techniques and actually have more science-backed data of the value than those techniques, like box breathing and 5.5-second inhalations, 5.5-second exhalations. You can do those in pretty much any setting, right? No one knows. No one knows that you're at the wedding doing 5.5-second in breath and 5.5-second out breath to manage your.
So let's talk about what the fix is, like which techniques.
Yeah. So I think the fix to this is twofold. Number one, if you are already teaching those techniques and you're like, but I like these techniques, keep teaching them. Teach them at the beginning of class. And then also include at the end of the class 2 to 5 minutes of a simpler breathing technique, like 5.5-second in breath, 5.5-second out breath, ujjayi breath, and box breathing, or even 3-part Viloma. Like 3-part Viloma is a simpler, easier to manage breathing technique that has very effective outcomes, right? The other option, if you're not already teaching those, or you already kind of feel like, yeah, I don't know, I'm teaching these, but intuitively, I get what these two are saying. Like intuitively, it just hasn't felt right. You can drop them and you can build up to those techniques. So again, I'm not saying that those are bad techniques or shouldn't be incorporated, but what you might find more effective is to more consistently teach simple 1-to-1 ratio ujjayi breathing, box breathing, and 3-part Viloma breathing. Those are all just simpler breathing techniques that have even better data science behind them to support their value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next mistake we want to mention is not using a timer or focusing on consistent ratios.
Yeah. So the mistake is not using a timer and focusing on consistent ratios. And let me just say this. Don't lose sleep over this issue. Like I put this in here. This is, I think, a refinement and improvement. But if you're like, oh my God, that seems like such a hassle, don't worry about it. It's not the world's biggest deal. But bear with me on this. This is why I put it in. every breathing technique, whether we talk about it as a contemporary breathwork practice or a traditional pranayama practice, with the exception of Kapalabhati and Bhastrika, is based in ratio. And so all pranayama techniques at their core are a ratio of breath. They're all a ratio of in-breath and out-breath. They are also a ratio of the space between the in-breath and the out-breath.
Yeah.
So we have many options. So I'm not suggesting right now on this podcast that there's one ratio to work with. We do that in the course. We look at different ratios. My point is, when you're teaching pranayama, you want to be sensitive to, first and foremost, this really is a ratio-based technique over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I want a consistent ratio for an increment of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it is virtually impossible to do that just by going like inhale 1, 2, 3, exhale 1. You can.
Yeah.
You can. You can count it out verbally. You can count it out in your head. Or you can just kind of wing it and be like, inhale, and then you're like, okay, exhale. But I think it is just so your level of accuracy and then therefore the effectiveness is going to be significantly improved if you just have a timer and you just understand some basic ratio-based techniques.
Yeah. Ginger's demonstrating for us right now how much a deep breath can help you relax.
I don't know if she's below my camera.
Yeah, I don't think people can hear it, but she's whistling.
They can't hear it. Yeah,
she's whistling a little bit with every exhalation.
Yes, she is.
Through her little snoot.
Yeah. So let me relate this really quick to asana technique, right? The core technique in pretty much all forms of pranayama are a measurement of breathing over time. Like that's the core technique. And so you totally can wing it, and just asking people to breathe slowly and smoothly for a period of time is all good. It's not bad. It's way better than nothing. But if you're interested in taking this one step deeper, then using a timer or using a watch works. And I just want to give a quick plug. When I do this, if I'm teaching on Glow, because on Glow, I'm filming with my camera. Excuse me, the camera is my phone.
Oh, okay.
So I can't use an app to keep time.
Okay.
But when I'm teaching a course, I use professional cameras. When I'm teaching a course, I use an app on my phone called iBreathe. Mm-hmm. And it's perfect.
Yeah.
Like you can set whatever parameter you want. It's really, really great.
It is a good one.
Spend the $2.99 so you don't have to deal with their stupid ads.
I use it too.
It's so good.
Highly recommend.
Or just use a watch with the second hand.
Yeah. Or just use your iPhone clocks.
Yeah.
You can use whichever way the timer works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're at number 5.
All right.
Okay. Number 5 is overcomplicating the cueing and the science.
Yeah. So I think I want to present the best way to teach pranayama. I really do. I think I can present this in just a couple minutes, and it will help clarify a lot for students. Okay. But first I got to make sure Ginger's okay. She is. She just moved. Okay. We've talked in this podcast about the importance of simplicity. We've talked in this podcast about the importance of, just a moment ago, maintaining a consistent breathing ratio for a period of time. Now, that period of time is subjective, and it's dependent on a lot of factors, including, is it a dedicated pranayama class or is it pranayama in a class? What we're talking about right now is pranayama in a class for 3 to 6 minutes, okay? When you are keeping time, you can't give a lot of instructions. because you don't have much time to give those instructions. So the best thing to do, in my experience, is to have a very brief little preparation where you tell people what you're going to do, and then you give them one technique, or you give them one nuance, or you give them one image, and you do that for a moment or two. I'm going to give some examples. And then you just have people breathe for the increment of time, and you're only calling out the inhalation and the exhalation. Okay? So here's my point. We want to think about chunking up the information so that when you're doing, I'm just going to say your 3 minutes of box breathing. When you're doing your 3 minutes of box breathing, you're not giving a bunch of cues. You're essentially saying inhale. You're letting people inhale. You're saying pause. You're letting people pause. You're saying exhale, and so on. You don't want to be teaching the technique or giving a ton of imagery while you're maintaining the timing. So the best thing to do in my experience, I'm just going to give a simple example. Okay, everybody, we're going to do 4 minutes of 5.5 second inhalations and 5.5 second exhalations. We're going to breathe in and out through our nose. And I want to just give you a little bit of imagery first for a moment. So before we settle into this timer, put your hands on your side ribs, kind of squeeze them a little bit, and imagine you have a balloon inside your ribs. Okay? Now, inhale and feel yourself and imagine that you're inflating that balloon, right? So your hands are giving some resistance as you inhale, feel that balloon expand. And then as you exhale, imagine that balloon emptying itself of air and feel those ribs compact and kind of pull in. Okay, we're going to do that for another moment again. So keep with your hands squeezing your ribs. Imagine there's a balloon inside your trunk. And as you inhale, inflate that balloon in all directions. Same thing, exhale, deflate it. Okay, great. So now we're going to start our 4 minutes, and you're going to do exactly what you just did. For each in-breath, you're going to imagine you're inflating the balloon. For each out-breath, you're going to imagine you're deflating it. Great. Now we're going to start. Inhale.
Mm-hmm.
So we've given a little teaching tip.
Right.
Or we've given a little
technique.
Mm-hmm. Or we've given some imagery. We gave it a moment to kind of prime it. And now we're in our session.
Right.
We're not trying to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to teach you how to execute the technique while I'm maintaining the timing ratio. That's another reason we just have to keep it simple, right? Now, what I can do, and what you can do, is after you've given that after you've, prepped in this same way, you can, when you're teaching those 4 minutes, you can occasionally, instead of just saying inhale, you can say inhale, fill the imaginary balloon. Exhale, let that balloon deflate. So you can call on something that you've brought up. But as a yoga teacher, especially if you aren't incredibly seasoned, it's very difficult to tell someone to inhale, give them information, and then exactly in 5.5 seconds, tell them to exhale, and then give them a bunch more information.
Yeah.
It's one of these situations. It's just so much better if you offload the more technical demands to one quick little phase, and you don't think like, I have to teach every technique and everything about every technique. Just teach them one technique and one image, and then go do that.
Let them do it. Yeah. It's impossible for you, and then it's a really challenging experience for them because they can't take all of that in while they're just trying to do the thing.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And one of the main things this requires is confidence, right? Like, don't you think that in situations where we have less confidence, we overcomplicate things?
Yeah, it's harder to, well, it's kind of like in writing, you always say it's harder to write short. It's harder to write short bits of copy because you have less space to pontificate right? And use adjectives and flowery language. Like, whereas when you have a really short space, you have to be concise and clear, and you have to know exactly what it is that you're trying to get across.
Yeah.
So it sounds similar to me. It's like you really have to have clarity in your communication.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And gosh, I was going to say something else, but I think it's gone. So we'll just, I know. I was going to say, what's your recommendation for the science-y part?
Yeah, I was literally just going to say
Okay.
that. Okay, I'm going to go all the way back to a moment I had. So, years and years ago, I was the yoga director at the San Francisco Bay Club. I've talked about in other settings. It was a lovely experience. And my office was directly across from this amazing Pilates studio. And I loved the Pilates teachers, and I enjoy Pilates. I love all that. I just remember this moment of this teacher who continued to tell their student what to do with their multifidi. And
you could hear it, you mean?
Yeah, I could hear it. And I'm just like, that student doesn't speak that language, right? I knew that student.
You could tell that. Okay. So it wasn't like an experienced Pilates student who maybe did speak that language. Okay.
So, or I'm going to give a few more examples before we get to the pranayama part. I teach anatomy. And when I teach anatomy, I tell all my students, I don't want you to use this language when you're teaching your students. This is background information. This is so that you understand. I want to teach you anatomy so that you understand why we use the techniques that we use. But I don't want you to learn anatomy so that in yoga class, you can tell someone what to do with the distal head of their fifth metatarsal.
Sure.
Or their right olecranon process, or their bleeping multifidi. Because the student base doesn't share that language, and there's common language that communicates that information just as well. If I tell you to, root down through your ischial tuberosities, I'm not giving you more accurate information than saying root down through your sitting bones, right? Like, it might sound more clinical and more accurate, but it's not more clinical and more accurate. It's just more obscure, specific, and arcane language. What I want us to really focus on is communicating what's happening in language that is simple and easy to understand, but doesn't diminish or undermine the value of what's happening. So I'll give a simple example of this, right? We want to lengthen the exhalation, right? So we're teaching everybody, we are going to focus today on 1 to 1.5 times breath. So what that means is we're going to inhale for 6 seconds. We're going to inhale for 6 seconds, and we're going to exhale for 9 seconds. When we do this, our exhalation is going to be 1.5 times the duration of our inhalation. And this is going to help us relax. And this is going to help us downshift the nervous system into a more calm, easy, and relaxed state. That's what I want to communicate. That's what I prefer to communicate, other than much more so than exhalation. Everybody, we're going to lengthen the exhalation, because by lengthening the exhalation, we are going to increase vagal tone. And by increasing vagal tone, we're going to downregulate the nervous system from a sympathetic nervous system response to a parasympathetic activation.
You could do that in a workshop.
Well, here's what I want to say. My point on this is, if I'm going to use the more erudite technical information, it's my job to say what that is.
Right. So, I think the potential rabbit hole you get yourself into when you do that is in an hour long or a 90-minute class, you don't have enough time to necessarily convey all the information in the order that it needs to be conveyed, and to the depth and accuracy that it needs to be conveyed.
Totally.
And in addition, a person coming into a 60 to 90 minute class might not be prepared to take in that level of information.
Totally.
But in a training or in a weekend workshop, that's a whole different beast.
Totally. And what I want to say is it's actually the same information.
Oh, sure,
right?
sure.
It's actually the same information. It's just like saying ischial tuberosities versus sitting bones.
Mm-hmm.
One seems
well, the outcome is the same.
The outcome is the same. The
Mm-hmm.
outcome is the same. Now, I'm going to pitch my course yet again.
Okay.
Because a lot of what we've talked about today is focused on incorporating pranayama into your existing classes, which is such a low lift and so valuable, and your students will love it. But exactly to your point, I think another way that is so valuable and underutilized is teaching pranayama in dedicated pranayama series. And so in this course, I teach and teach teachers to teach a progressive 8-part pranayama practice, and each class is 30 minutes. So that environment where we're like, oh, well, let's look at the mechanism a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, everybody, this class, this is our 4th class. We've worked on X, Y, and Z. Today, we're going to focus on lengthening the exhalations. Lengthening the exhalation is going to help us relax. Here's just a quick moment of the science as to why that is.
Mm-hmm.
So there are environments that lend themselves to talking, to
giving
including
people
the
more
scientific
background.
information where there's more background.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that sometimes when we do this in an environment that is shorter on time and that isn't a specialized environment with a community of students that already speaks the language, I want people to let it be simple.
Sure.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
let it be simple.
And it does require that you think ahead of time about what you want to convey to them, because you don't have as much time. You don't have as many words. It's just like writing short.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to go back quickly to what you're talking about in the program. So this is module 3,
Yeah.
if people are wondering, and it's
in the training.
In the
Yeah.
training. And it's like a little mini curriculum, right?
Yes.
That people can then, a teacher could then take and teach to their own students or their own.
Yeah, it's
Right.
really, the course is really broken down so that people can do 2 things. They can incorporate pranayama in their existing classes, whether it's a hatha class, vinyasa class, yin class, whatever it is. If you want to incorporate pranayama in your existing classes, we've got you covered. But it also presents, like in the training, there's also an 8-part series full of 30-minute classes that are designed to build a pranayama practice from the ground up. And the people in the training, you use this to develop your own personal pranayama practice, but then this also becomes the perfect series for you to offer in your community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And the Midwesterner in me wants to say this, although it's a little bit crass. In every training I do, I create trainings because
Are you going to use the word value?
I am.
Okay, good.
Something like it. So I create trainings pretty much based on what I love and wish I had learned earlier in a more methodical and systemized way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in so many ways, the trainings I create they're self-serving. They're because I love the content and I want to go deeper and I want to share those interests and take other people deeper.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I want teachers to be able to immediately apply the content. Now that seems obvious, but I take this training even further. I want you to be able to immediately make back your money and more.
Yeah.
Because
that's a good way to put it. I
right?
mean, it's
Like,
actually
I want
really
you to make back your money
makes
and more.
sense.
And I'm going to tell you this. Really, all you have to do is create a pranayama series based on the pranayama series that I've provided and get 4 people to do it. And you will more than pay for the price of the course.
There you go. And then you'll have something new to teach too, which is always fun and
Super
exciting and
inspiring.
interesting and
Super inspiring
Yeah.
and developing. And that's why I don't like, I know, yeah, like that is a specific money pitch because we are also making a livelihood, but also at the same time, the bigger picture is the more as yoga teachers we're learning and crafting new and different things, the more excited we're going to be to just keep showing up for ourselves and for our students.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, thanks, Jason. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks everyone for listening. If you're interested in learning more about the course, getting all the details and signing up, go to jasonyoga.com/breathwork. I'm actually really excited. As soon as we stop here, I'm going to go do my second breathwork practice of the day.
I am too. I'm kind of losing my mind here.
Okay. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next week, enjoy your practice.